Hello, welcome to the next round of top 10. In this case, we're doing top 15. There is no other video this season. There's just not enough cards I really want to talk about for Pioneer, but we have brand new Bloomburrow cards to talk about. That's why I said at my top 15, really the top 15 to 11 are my top 5 favorite cards that I'm most excited for. And then the top 10, of course, goes into the actual, I think, are the most likely to actually see play. So, if you like this content, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, hit that notification so you're for future videos. We're on our way to 2,000 subs. Let's get there together and let's get into this list and discuss. So, starting off with a couple rounds of honorable mentions. So, Into the Flood, this card in Pioneer will probably only strictly see play in something like Lotus Field, where they're planning on comboing off. They just need to get rid of a damping sphere before they go off that turn. So this is a nice way of just making sure for 1 mana that we can tap our 2 Lotus Fields, bounce the damping sphere, play a pour over pages, untap, and go for our combo. Blacksmith's Talent is strictly just in case Hammer Time. I will be trying that out this season in Jank Tank this season, but it could come up now. Do we have enough pieces? We have Sigarda's Aid. We have this. I don't know. Probably not. Long River's Pool. It reads as if it's like a counters or a old school counter spell. Blue, gift a card. You may give your opponent a card. If you do, you may counter that any target spell. Otherwise, you just counter a creature spell. This card is strictly for decks like fairies, spirits, whatever, right? If there is a tempo style deck that does not have a special counter, spirits and fairies do. But if there's another tribe that is a tempo deck, then this would be the correct call, potentially, right? This card really wants to be in a deck that can apply enough pressure to minimize the downside of giving your opponent a draw. Because strictly, you're going to be using this to counter a Wrath against your creatures, stuff like that. So you need to have a clock for this. Otherwise, I don't see this card making a lot of a constructive play when it comes to something like control or something like that, right? But that is the first wave of honorable mentions. Let's get into the next. Next, we have the infamous Cruel Claw. 1 black, red, 3/3 menace. Whenever it deals damage to a player, exile top card from your library until you reveal a non-land. You may discard a card and then cast it for free. I'm going to be trying this out in Jund midrange, so expect that one to come up this season. We have Alug, the Shoreless Sea. 1 blue, XX based on number of islands. Then you could make your lands have the land type of an island, which reduces the cost of the spells that you cast. I don't necessarily know if this is a quote-unquote control shell piece. I think this is more something like a blue tempo style piece. It is a groundy, which is a huge issue. But besides that, it does turn your lands into making sure they tap for blue at all times. And as well as, like I said, it reduces the cost of your spells, which is pretty nice overall to have in the deck. Last but not least, for the honorable mentions, we have Valley Might Caller. It's 1 green, 1/1 Frog Warrior, trample. Whenever another frog, rabbit, raccoon, or squirrel you control enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on it. This type of effect is quite strong. The issue that the tribes that this thing wants are very weak. They're not actually really competitive in Pioneer. So this card is an honorable mention. It could very well be top 10, right? If the tribes allowed it to be top 10. So that's kind of the issue with this card. It just does not really matter, right? Rabbits aren't really a tribe in Pioneer. Frogs, maybe you could make a frog deck, but it's definitely more of a meme than anything else. Raccoons are basically a brand new tribe. Then you have squirrels, which I believe this is like one of the few times in Pioneer that we actually got squirrels. We've gotten a decent amount of them on Horizons, but we don't talk about that on this channel because we are a Pioneer channel. So let's get into the top 15. So number 15 on my list is Bandit's Talent. 1 in a black. When ETBs, each opponent discards 2 cards, unless they discard a non-land. So if they have nothing but lands in their hand, like 2 or 3 of them, they're going to pitch 2 cards, which is quite powerful. We also, the 1 black makes this thing turn into essentially a rack. So that's kind of nice. That's kind of the main reason why I'm excited about this card. We're not going to try Waste Not this season. Instead, we're going to scrap it, use the basis instead of playing Waste Not and stuff like that. Instead, we are going to be trying out rack pieces. We have essentially 8 copies of rack. We have 4 of these and then 4 of the other card, which is a 1-drop. And let's see if we can't win with the rack and Pioneer. Let's get into number 14 on my list as my personal favorites. Number 14 is Hugs, Grizzly Guardian. X, red, red, green, green. Badger Warrior, Trample, 5/5. Then ETBs, X out of the top X cards of your library, where X is basically the mana that you paid into it, and you play additional lands on each of your turns. This card, I think I'm actually excited for it in bar class. Now, the reason being is you have 2 active bar classes. This should just cost X. It's a 5/5, and it digs for more pieces to keep comboing off that turn. So this kind of does what bar class wants. It's a reasonable sized body. It helps you dig for bar class until your next turn. So you have a full turn cycle to utilize the cards. And I think this card actually could be pretty reasonable. Sad that he looks like he is like smashing a rabbit. But, you know, he's pretty chunky and he's a badger. I'm not sure why he's not a raccoon. But, you know, so I do think this card is, like I said, relatively decent maybe for bar class. Keep in mind a lot of these top 5, 15 to 10 are cards that I want to play in my specialty list. 13 is Paw Patch Recruit. 1 green, Offspring. 2, you make a 1/1 copy of this thing. It has Trample. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a spell an opponent controls or ability, put a counter on target creature you control other than that creature. So I think this card in general is a nice little, maybe a nice little piece for hardened scales. I'm not sure if that is actually a thing. If this actually makes the cut over something like Evolve Wild, or I should say Experiment 1, you know, those type of effects. I think it's definitely better than the there was that fungus, I think. Shramble? I don't remember his name. 1 mana 1/1 that you could tap it, put a counter on it, or it can, you know, get bigger. It makes a little token if you target it, front targets it. I think this is better than that because it actually fulfills the Hardened Scales plan, while also being a relatively okayish body. 1 mana 2/1 with Trample is reasonable with a Offspring, so they can start targeting each other if your opponent starts targeting your threats. But I think this card is pretty reasonable. Maybe can see some minor play in Pioneer as a Hardened Scale piece, but besides that, probably better pieces than this. So let's get to number 12 on my list. Innkeeper's Talent. 1 in a green. At the beginning of your combat, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Permanents you control with ward counters have ward 1. So a little bit of protection on an enchantment. And then you get to the level 3, like it does become kind of like a Hardened Scales. It does take basically 7 mana to get there, which is kind of a lot. It's not really a good card with something like Collect a Company if you're going that route with your Hardened Scales deck. So I'm not sure if this actually makes the cut over the Ozolith. I do like the fact that it does give your creatures ward 1, and it does put counters on every single turn, similar to a Luminarch Aspirant. But I'm not sure if this makes the cut over, like I said, the Ozolith. Let me know down in the comment section, what do you guys think about this card? Let's get into number 11 on my list. Number 11 is not necessarily more for me, as it's more for Jason. One of my big members on, of course, supporting my content since for a very long time. He loves Storm. There's not really a Storm deck in Pioneer in the same regards how he likes it. So he doesn't really classify Lotus Field as Storm. But, so this is a nice little duo pieces to potentially maybe make a Storm style deck. We have a artist talent, 1 and a red. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you discard a card and draw a card. So it's kind of like a Jeskai Ascendancy mode. You may level to level 2, and all your non-creature spells get discounted. So if you play your second artist talent, you can make it, cost 1 red and go from there. Then if you get to the last mode, basically increases your non-combat damage by 2. So that's pretty reasonable for a Storm payoff, because now your bolts are doing 5. So your shocks are doing 4. So that's pretty reasonable as a way to close the game out relatively fast. Of course, we have Rao Crackling Wit, 2, 1, blue and a red, 4 loyalty, Planeswalker. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a loyalty counter on him. You may uptick it, make a 1/1 otter with prowess. It's kind of like Jaya, which is not a very playable card. -3, draw 3 cards, discard 2 cards. Also kind of mid, but if we can get it to level 10, loyalty, draw 3 cards, get an emblem, instant sorceries now have Storm. So that's pretty awesome overall. I'm going to be trying this out. I'm going to try to work with Jason on how to build this deck. If you have any suggestions at all on how to build Is It Storm for Pioneer, let me know down in the comment section, or join the Discord in the link in the description. Let's get into the official top 10 and break them down. Now, number 10 is kind of an honorable mention to my top 5 favorite cards of the set. I love this card. This card is honestly my most favorite card of the set. Sunspine Lynx. 2 and red, 5/4. Players can't gain life, so it kind of hates on Amalia. It's probably better than the Giant that sees play. Damage can't be prevented. Not really a clause that matters in Pioneer. Modern, it can stop the One Ring. And when it ETBs, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basics that player controls. I'm going to be trying this out with the Punisher, as multiple ways of just hurting my opponent for playing non-basics. So I think that's going to be kind of sweet. If you have any other considerations for this kind of archetype, let me know down in the comment section. But I know those playsets of both are going to make the cut. Maybe I play Ferocidon as more ways to prevent life gain, so we could just really screw over Amalia. And, it kind of has it coming. Sorry, but not sorry. But so I think, I don't know how I want to construct the deck, but like I said, all suggestions are welcome down in the comment section. Let's get into number 9. Number 9 on my list is Blooming Blast, 1 and a red. You can give your opponent a treasure. If you do, this does 3 damage to that creature's controller. It deals 2 damage to a creature. Honestly, besides giving your opponent a fish, this is definitely the best thing to give your opponent out of the 3 options that I've been aware of. Of course, the fish doesn't really matter. A treasure is kind of whatever, right? I mean, they have one temporary, one-time usage of the mana. This card, I think, is just better than Searing Blood. It sees play in red, and the reason for it is twofold, right? One, Searing Blood is red, which is just horrible, right? Because it basically means you can't play Jangata anymore. The other key piece is Searing Blood already has a non-bow with Soulscar Mage. So if you neg something to death, I believe it does cancel it out because you're not actually dealing damage. So that's not even including. Oh wait, it's Kamano, right? Kamano also has a non-bow with it because if you kill the creature, it gets exiled, which gets around the actual dice clause of it, so they don't actually take 3 damage. Sorry about that. I know there's one of the two. I know Soulscar Mage has its own non-bows in the deck. But I believe, it's Kamano. So if it's flipped over, you basically you're trying to kill a creature, it gets exiled, which negates the actual 3 damage to your opponent's face, which in a burn deck you really kind of need. So I really think this card is actually just a better option. The Question is, does it show up as 2 main, 2 side, especially with mono green on the uptick? This does kill Blood Tithe Harvester, so which is really nice. I say killing the elves is really essential because you don't really want to waste spells on the elf that should be going to the face. This one, you can still kill the elf and deal 3 damage to the face. But in that matchup, I guess the treasure does hurt a little bit more because they do get to get that 3 drop down. But either way, it's a one-time temporary thing. But I think this card is really good. I know people are kind of poo-pooing on it because they think the treasure is that huge of a downside. I mean, it is a downside, but it's not like you're giving them a card, which is just essentially just much worse. So let's get into number 8 on my list. Number 8 is Iridescent Vinelasher. Vinelasher. I had it right. 1 black, 1 2. Landfall. Whenever land enters the battlefield under your control, do 1 damage to target opponent. It does trigger crimes, but doesn't really matter. I'm kind of thinking about I want to try it this season, paired with the 4 drop that deals damage based on when swamps enter the battlefield. So that 4 drop plus this one, we might have enough ways in black and green to be able to actually scape shift and get a bunch of swamps ETB because we still have Urborg, which really helps with that. And then we could just snipe our opponent for 3 damage per swamp. Also, turn 3, this does give you 2 bodies right before you escape shift, which kind of seems like it was destined to be. Besides that, this card could show up in other formats where there's predominant amounts of fetches. Pioneer, we do have some number of fetches. So this card still, I think, is pretty reasonable overall. Number 7 on my list. This is also a very speculative pick. Dark Star Augur. 2 and a black. 2/3 flyer. When at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Put that card into your hand. You lose life equal to its mana value. And you could pay additional black and make a 1/1 copy of this. So on turn 5, you can basically double Bob triggers. Is Bob still good as a 3 drop? That is something I don't know. I do think this card is reasonable, but I'm not sure if it actually is up to snuff for Pioneer. Bob might be actually playable, but if you tack on an extra mana, I don't know if that's actually going to make the card actually good anymore. Especially considering the fact that I think Bob, for the most part, wants to be in a deck with 2 drops as the tap off, right? So if you're taking 2 damage off of Bob, whatever, right, you'll deal with that. But if you're having a 3 drop in your deck or a 4 drop in your deck, then the deck just becomes kind of bad. So I'm not sure if a 3 drop, which basically means that this card has a higher chance of dealing more damage to you than otherwise with a normal Bob. So let me know in the comment section what you guys think of Bab. That's what I'm calling it, BAB, because it's Bat Bob. Cut the T, place it with the B, got Bab. So we have ourselves a Bab. Let me know in the comment section what do you guys think about this card. Do you think it could show up in Pioneer? My biggest worry is the 3 drop slot is kind of already consumed, right? Like you have Preacher of the Schism, you have Graveyard Trespasser, you have Glissa, you have, there's multiple other options at this 3 drop slot that I think it's kind of harder to fit it in. Unless you warrant this as a 4 drop, and then if it's a 4 drop, why aren't you playing Shieldred? So this will probably, if anything, would see play in mono black aggro as the top end with stuff like, Copter and stuff like that. But let's get into number 6 on my list. Number 6 on my list is Scavenger's Talent, 1 black. Whenever 1 or more creatures you control die, create a food. This only happens once per turn. This might be okay in Rakdos Sacrifice for that top mode. But in addition to that, in Rakdos Sacrifice, you could pay 1 and a black, get it to level 2. Now, what I like about this card, since you are playing the cat combo, As you're moving along in the deck, if you have the oven, but you don't have the cat just yet, right, you can sack your blood tokens and stuff like that. Get yourself some Mayhem Devil triggers. In addition to that, you can mill yourself to find the cat to help really getting this thing amped up. So I think that is kind of where you want to be with this card. And then, of course, if all else fails, you get to level 3. Beginning of your end step, you sacrifice 3 other non-land permanents. When you do, basically you're going to get back a Mayhem Devil. So that is also relatively not a bad mode. Is this powerful enough to make Rakdos Sacrifice playable again? I don't know. Of course, you also could argue the new cat could show up in Jun Rakdos Sacrifice, but it's a 5-drop, which is really clunky. I don't know if it's better than stuff like Corvold, stuff like that. So I don't even know if you want to be with a 5-drop in Rakdos Sacrifice or Jun Sacrifice. But let's get to number 5 on my list. So now we're bridging into the cards that I pretty much guarantee could see play, right? These are cards that I'm much more confident in. The first card we're going to talk about is Beza, the Bounding Spring. 2 white, legendary creature, elemental elk, 4/5. When it ETBs, create a treasure token. If opponent has more lands than you, you gain 4 life. If opponent has more life than you, create 2 1/1 blue fish tokens. If they have more creatures than you, draw a card. If your opponent has more cards in hand than you. So, you're probably thinking, okay, where does this card see fit? I've still seen freaking control players play the cat, right? No offense to you or anyone else, but if you're playing that old 5-drop cat, probably just play this instead. It just does everything on ETB, so immediately comes down. If you're behind a life, you gain 4. Instead of making 1/1 cats with lifelink, you're making 2 1/1 fish tokens. It's 1 less mana, which is just really important, especially if you're trying on turn 6 or something like that, where you have 6 mana. You could invest 4 mana into this, leave up 2 mana for a counterspell. Stuff like that. This card, I think, is just a lot more... It's just not as narrow as the cat, right? This is good in other matchups, which I think is really nice. Even against other control players, if you're exhausting your resources more than your opponent, you could just... This comes down and becomes a nice body, and you draw a card. That's still fine, right? So I think this card is a little bit more uses outside of the matchups where cat's good, that this could show up. So let me know in the comment section if you are just playing the cat at this point because it's the cat and you kind of just like the cat, or are you going to be replacing it with Beza? Because I think this card is relatively better than that, pound for pound statistically wise. But you know, sometimes you just play what you like, which is kitty cats. Let's get into number 4 on my list. Number 4 on my list is a 2/4. We have the 3 Tree City. It comes down, choose a creature type, adds a colorless mana like Nykthos, it's legendary. You pay 2 in it, choose a color, add mana equal to the number of creatures with the chosen type. So if you're an elf deck, this makes a lot of mana. So like it's really nice in those kind of strategies. There's not that much tribal besides vampires, but vampires really is just getting down a fat vein ripper. So this is probably not right for that. So it would have to be a tribe that goes wide. Adjacent to it also maybe having some big boom booms at the end. Also, on my number 4 slot, Fountain Port. It taps for a single colorless. You may pay 2 into it, sacrifice a token, draw a card. This is probably more for a token deck, but if there is a token deck in Pioneer, you should probably play a copy or 2 of this, since most likely, unless you are a Jetmir deck, you're going to be 2 color, and that's green and white. So pay 3, tap it, pay a life, make a blue fish. Not really sure why you're making fish. It doesn't. It's a fountain in the port. Where's fish? Why is fish? Why are fish in the fountain? I don't get it. It's probably not really that accurate. Also, you could pay 4, tap it, create a treasure token. Seems very expensive for a treasure token. You know, it's not a bad land. You can compare it to Mirax. Is it better than Mirax? In the right shells, it is. In control and mid range, is it better than Mirax? Probably not. You're not making enough tokens to make the second mode actually profitable most of the time. This probably is not the right deck for it. But if you are able to produce extra tokens just all the time, like Boros Convoke, maybe you play a copy or two of this because it does help you in the matchups you're bad against, except for Amalia. We don't talk about Amalia on this channel. So that is number 4 on my list. It's kind of a twofer, but both of these lands are quite powerful. And sadly, we didn't get any dual lands in this set. But what are you going to do? Actually, also, why didn't we get a tribal land in this set? I get we got Cavern of Souls a few sets ago, but why didn't we get like another unclaimed territory to reprint it or whatever? Like, why are we stuck with these weird lands that don't really seem to be logical? But all right, number 3 on my list. This is kind of controversial because if this set was before the last set, this would be my number 1 pick. But since last set came before this one, it's number 3. It's less likely to actually show up now because for the most part, we have a decent amount of stock of good 1-drops. So the 2-drop slot is really only getting filled by just Slick Shot Show Off. And that seems to be the huge hindrance to this card. And why it's not number 1? Because there's no world where you would ever play this over that. Even a heroic, like there's no reason to want to play this card over something like Slick Shot Show Off. Slick Shot Show Off is just such a much better, more superior card than this is. So where this card could show up is maybe in heroic, but not in the Slick Shot Show Off slot. Maybe it takes over if you're still playing 10 District Legionnaire. I don't think this card would take over the Illuminator slot because, I mean, that's just like 5/5 double strike. It's very often just such a lethal threat. This is not that. It is card advantage, but, you know, it's not necessarily that great in that regard. And it's not really going to see much play in something like PNLR, which you could argue also might want something like this. Because they do actively want to cast out from exile. But the problem is, like, they don't really have much stuff that targets your stuff. So they don't really enable the Valiant. So I'm not sure what deck this goes into. Like I said, if it was printed before Slick Shot Show Off, it would see actual play right now because it's much better than the other alternatives. In most decks, like Mono Red, even though it's not a wizard, it's just really good. Or even like Boros Bird, you would play this. But now Show Off's in the picture. It's harder to justify more copies of 2-drops when you want to like overload on 12 1-drops. So that's kind of why it's number 3. The other 2 cards will make a little bit more sense why they're up higher on my list. But let's get to number 2. Number 2 is Keen-Eyed Curator. Green 3/3. Basically a decent, size body. For the longest time, I mean, this was a relatively good stat line for a 2-drop green creature. Then, on top of that, if this creature has exile 4 or more different card types with this exile ability, if that he does exile 4 different types of cards, he gets an additional 4/4 and trample. So essentially, if you play your cards right, it should be a 7 mana 7/7 trample, which spread out across however many turns. You could have it online as quickly as turn 3. If, of course, you play this on turn 2 and turn 3, no, I guess you can't do that because you only have 3 mana unless you play Elf into all 4 mana, exile 4 different card types. But how are you supposed to do that when you're basically relying on your opponent, which means you're probably facing Phoenix? So the advantage of this is kind of the modern day Tarmogoyf. That's my comparison. Because on average, Tarmogoyf becomes a 6/5. 767. That's like the biggest you'll ever see a Tarmogoyf. And this kind of is become this card can become a 7/7. So stats wise, it's comparable. The thing is, like, this also gains the keyword trample. So this is definitely the best raccoon in the set. So if you're definitely drafting or whatever, make sure you pick this up. This is a really good Magic card. And let's get into number 1 on my list. Let's get into it. Number 1 is Storm Chaser's Talent. Now, this is a 1 mana enchantment that ET Beast makes a 1/1 blue otter with prowess. That's basically what you're playing it for. So it is a 1-drop that triggers a lot like Kamano, right? It triggers prowess. Later in the game, it does flip over to a creature. In this case, we just make a token right away. So that's quite powerful, and with the actual, prowess synergies. We don't really have it is it prowess deck yet. So this is probably better than the otter from Wilds of Eldraine, which isn't saying a lot because it really hasn't seen that much constructed play in Pioneer. But I think this is better, like I said, just due to the pure factor that this card just right out of the gate starts off, makes a 1/1 and triggers prowess. Mid game, on turn 4, if you run out of gas, you could level this up to level 4 or level 2, and you get to return an instant or sorcery from your graveyard to your hand, which could get a Spell Pierce back if you need to protect your threats, like a slip out the back, stuff like that. Or it could also just get back a burn spell or a blossoming defense, whatever, right? So actually that's kind of cool. I wonder if there's enough cards now where Simic Prowess could be a thing. Let me know in the comment section if you want to see Simic Prowess, because that could be actually a thing now. I don't know. But if you ever get to 6 mana, it's kind of win more, unless somehow you just don't have creatures. And you need to make 1/1s because you're facing control, but control probably can destroy this enchantment before it goes too long. So let me know down in the comment section what card of these were your favorites. What card do you think is going to have the biggest impact on Pioneer? Is my list a phony? I want to know all that down in the comment section. Like I said, I do think this arguably would have been number 2 on my list or number 3. But considering the fact that Slickshot Show Off kind of makes the mouse worse, just because it's weaker in comparison, means this card actually is probably more likely to shake up the meta, because like I said, it is a 1-drop, it triggers prowess, it makes a 1/1, does all the things. I think it checks all the box of a playable Magic card. Until next season, or really a couple weeks, where we start making new content for Bloomburrow. Check out all that content. The first week, I know I'm doing gates right out of the gate, which seems kind of funny, but yeah, because we got a new frog that basically digs into your first land, which most likely will be a gate. And if you build the deck right, it should probably work quite well. But other than that, I will talk to you guys then. Make sure you guys, if you guys want to catch a live stream, look down in the description for the link to my Twitch, or even just look at my page. There's a link to my Twitch. Go ahead and hit that follow button there. I do live streams on Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, and Sunday during the day. So if you want to catch me live, discuss these Magic cards, make sure you do that as well. Like I said, my Discord is in the description as well if you want to join my Discord and have a discussion. But until next time, hopefully you guys have a great rest of your day. Talk to you soon.